Hey guys, welcome back to Down and Dirty Modding. I'm Dave, and today I was going to start on my Meshify C here, getting that front panel pulled apart and prepped for paint, but I thought maybe there was something we should talk about first, and that's paint. I've seen a lot of good tutorials over applying paint and finishing paint. Check out GeForce Garage or mnpctech.com. I watched those tutorials. They're great things to learn from. But I haven't run across anything that really kind of explains the different styles of paint that we use and where they work best and some of the pros and cons of those paints. So I thought maybe we'd do a video over that real quick. Go over some of the stuff that I typically use in cases around the shop, and maybe that'll help you pick a style of paint you're going to use for your case mod. Maybe get you past that learning curve that I had to go through to figure out all this stuff about paint. Now I am going to kind of gloss over, over the specifics and the science of it, just because there is so much information out there and so many styles of paint that it's hard to cover everything and make it make sense in a quick video. So if you'd like something like that, leave me a comment down in the comment section. I'll try to throw something together. I will warn you, my knowledge is more wide than it is deep. So it won't be a chemistry lesson. It'll be basically, this is what I've learned. Here, you do what you want with that information. So we're going to start off with our paint primer with primer. This is what I use almost 90-95% of the time, an automotive etch, and this is a higher grade than what you're going to find at like a hardware store or a home box store. Basically a little more pricey, but worth it because this is the foundation of your paint job. This is what everything else builds off of, so spending the extra dime on it isn't a bad idea. Now there are a lot of different types of primers out there. I stick with an etch because I like the thinner coat that it gives me, and also this has an acidic component that actually on bare metal will eat into that metal, and I guess maybe probably the paint a little bit too. But it helps stick a little tighter. Give it a little more bite. On top of primers, you can use filler primers and epoxies and all that. I stay away from those. I don't like the fillers just because even though they're great at filling pits and scratches and stuff like that, I don't like the softness of the paint. I don't like the thickness of it. It ends up being more work for me in the end usually. And then epoxies and stuff, well, that's just a whole thing on its own. And usually requires a little bit more equipment to apply. So beginning modding or even intermediate modding, usually just a can of regular primer or two, probably or three, is the best way to start out. So this is stuff that I use and highly recommend. And as far as primers go, anything you paint should have a primer coat on it, just to make sure that the paint's going to stick to it. So next up, we're going to stick with the rattle cans. And we're going to talk about spray paint. This is the godsend of paints for case modding. This stuff works in almost any situation. It's easy to apply, easy to clean up. Big parts, little parts, fans, shrouds, bezels, everything. It can pretty much be painted with spray paint. Really, I can't think of anything better to say. I mean, it's just one of those things where you can use it anywhere on a case pretty much. It does have some drawbacks. Number one is it's touchy about its cures and how it cures out. So you'll notice that most spray paints have like a recoat within 1 hour or wait 48 hours to recoat. And that deals with how this paint cures. In that first hour, the paint's open and you can still add a coat of paint where it will mix with that first coat, but after that it won't. So that's what happened whenever you try to rush that 48-hour cure, or how do I explain that a little better? The full cure is in 48 hours. If you try to apply paint to it before it fully cures out, that original coat of paint is still gassing out. The solvent's still evaporating out. So any paint that you apply over that will have bubbles of gas rise through it, giving you pinholes and cracking and stuff like that. So the big thing with spray paint, to make sure you get a good paint job with it, is to follow the instructions to a T. That also adds a bit of a problem when you come into trying to paint multiple colors together. So if you're painting your case and you're going to put a stripe on it. You've got to wait 48 hours before you can tape that stripe out and lay it down. Now, normally that's not an issue. For us on this case, we're actually going to use like 3 different colors on this front panel. So using spray paint to paint 3 different colors all taped off from each other would add like, I think it'd be like a week-long process just because of the cure time. So for stuff like that, it's not the best solution. There are better products for that. But for just about everything else, this is a great way to get into painting. I say easy to use, cheap to get. It doesn't require a whole lot of extra anything. No spray guns or spray equipment, and just all around multi-purpose great paint. So highly recommend it, but also follow the instructions. Always follow the instructions on this stuff, and you won't have any problems, or shouldn't have any problems. Let me say that. Next up, I'm going to look at, let's go to my detail paints. These are things that I don't use very often, and I don't have a whole lot of useful information over. These are art store acrylics. Basically, I use them for weathering. They're detail paints. They're not something you're going to use all over the case. Basically, if you want to weather a case and you want it to look dirty, these things are the way to go. You can mix them up with a little bit of water to thin them out. Apply them to the case, wipe them off with a rag, and it leaves a little bit of a grime look to it. So black for grime and oil, add some ochres and siennas for dirt. But that's really all I've got to say about those. They aren't very, very useful outside of that, at least in my experience. And the same kind of goes with, these are model paints. I kind of don't like them just because I had so much bad experience with them as a kid painting models, and all the horrible paint jobs that came about. But I'm sure some people will have great luck with these. It's a basic enamel paint. Kind of nice the fact that you can put it on with a brush or thin it out and put it through an airbrush. So if you wanted to paint some small details, you could brush this stuff on those pretty easily, so not a whole lot of extra effort. As far as cure times and stuff, I'm not really even sure how long. I'd say probably a day. You probably want to read the instructions on that. That's probably why I had so much trouble as a kid, is I was not patient at all. And like I say, I really don't use these a whole lot. One of the big things that's a problem for me is they're in such small bottles that you can't paint a fan with. You need like 4 bottles of paint. So I stay away from these. Every now and then I'll use them on something that they work well for. And like on this case, if we wanted to paint that multicolor in the front, you could use these. If you sprayed it with an airbrush, you'd still have to wait for the cure times to tape everything off. But you could, if you were good, brush it on and brush your edges and probably knock it out pretty quick with these, although you need quite a few bottles of paint, I think. So that's why I'm just not real big on these at all. The next one, let's look at almost the most expensive, and that's automotive, or not automotive, but these are airbrush paints. And the paints themselves aren't that expensive. They're, I think $5 to $6 a pop for a little bottle like this, depending on where you get them. But you have to have an airbrush to apply these, so that's kind of a step-in cost. Now, once you get that airbrush, these things become magic. They're gold. Airbrush paints can work just pretty much anywhere in a case. If you get a big enough gun and a big enough bottle of paint, you can paint the exterior of the case. You can paint details. You can do any of your components with them. They work very well. They're very easy to work with once you figure the airbrush out. That was one of my big learning lessons, was using an airbrush. And also what I really like about these, other than the fact that they're easy to clean up, is that they dry really fast. So that 2-day cure time on spray paint, this stuff, once that water kind of cures out and dries out, you can go right back over it with another coat of paint. So you're looking at 15 to 20 minutes between coats of paint, which is awesome if you're trying to paint a bunch of different colors or put a lot of layers of paint on really quick. So like our front panel, I'll probably use airbrush paints just because I can paint one of my colors, give it half an hour to dry out, tape it off, paint the next one. I can take what would normally be a week-long process and get it done in a day. Now, the one drawback with stuff like that is this stuff goes on really thick and it's rather fragile. So once we're all said and done, painted all our different colors, we're going to have to take a clear coat over the top of this to protect it from abuse. And that's one of the big drawbacks with this stuff, is that it just can't take the abuse that a spray enamel or even an automotive urethane can take. One other nice bonus about these is the fact that you can mix custom colors up. So spray paints you're kind of limited in what's on the shelf. Automotive urethanes, you can have them mix up whatever color you want at the shop. But this one, you can mix up on the fly, which can be really great for weathering stuff, or if you need a custom color to match your theme. You can mix and match until you get it just exactly where you want it. So very, very happy to use airbrush paints. They work out very well for me. So that's airbrush paints. And then the big daddies, the very expensive paint to jump into because of all sorts of stuff. Automotive urethanes. Now, these are 2K paints, and what a 2K paint is paint that requires 2 parts. So 2K paints take a base coat and then an activator to activate that paint so it cures out. Whereas like a 1K paint, like a spray paint, is already mixed and already ready to go out of the can. This requires 2 parts. You'll notice that there is the back of another can. It's actually 3 parts here, and what this is the reducer, so you can reduce this down to the gun. Technically, it's not necessary for it to make the paint work, but you're going to want it if you want to put it through a gun. That's part of what makes this expensive, is the fact that, number one, the base coats aren't cheap. I think this quart was maybe 80 bucks. But then on top of that, you've got to buy your reducer and then your activator, which aren't necessarily cheap. And then to apply it, you have to have a compressor and a spray gun. So definitely not something for the novice just to step into and start spraying. It does take a little bit of practice to get good at it. But once you get good at putting this down and you have the equipment to do it, this is going to be the best quality spray or best quality paint job you're going to put down. One bad thing is whenever you mix up this paint, you want to make sure you have everything ready to go. If you're doing, you know, the case, the exterior of the case, maybe some parts on the inside, maybe your ram stick, your ram heat spreaders, or the front bezel or something like that. If you're painting those as well, you want to paint all of that at once, because you're going to mix up a batch of paint, paint it all. If you're doing it piece by piece, you're going to be screwing yourself, because you're going to be mixing up batches of paint and wasting part of it because you're not getting everything painted. So part of a drawback with that is just that you have to mix it, and it has a certain amount of pot life, and it just makes it a little bit more complicated to actually paint. But like I say, this is going to be the best finish you can put on a case. Just more difficult, more expensive to step into. And hopefully that kind of clears up paint some a little bit. Probably the best thing I can say as far as sort of a summary is if you're looking just to paint 1 case or 2 cases, or get into case modding and start at it, spray paint is your best friend. Hands down. It's the easiest to apply, the easiest to work with. You don't need a lot of special tools to use it. And it comes in a relatively decent amount of colors to do just about most anything you want to do. The next thing that I would step up to, if it were me, would be an airbrush, just because you get a lot of options as far as details. You can do large scale jobs with it, and just some of the effects you can pull off with the airbrush make it just so nice to use, as far as, you know, weathering, and also for edging stuff, and the fast cure times on the paint help. They're really nice too. And then after that, you can step up into the high-end automotive if you want to get to it, but it's not totally necessary. Spray paint is, for most practical uses, as good a paint as you're going to have. So I say, hopefully that kind of clears some of this stuff up. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section. If you want to know more about what I'm going to be doing to this case, go ahead and subscribe. And if you like the video, give me a like. You know, never going to turn those down, right? I guess that's all I've got. So get out there and mod something, guys, or go out and paint something. Shoot. See you later.